Well, the Red Wings lose twice in one day. Let's talk about it all today on Locked On Red Wings.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Red Wings. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Tuesday, October 1st, 2024. Thank you so much for making Locked On Red Wings your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off of your first purchase. Welcome in, welcome all. Happy Tuesday, everybody. I am obviously not with Brian yet again. He is honeymooning with the love of his life, having a great time. Congratulations to the Fishers, as I'm sure they are enjoying their time off. We're holding down the fort here, and today we have a really weird situation where we have two hockey games to talk about that happen at the same time, right? Sometimes Brian and I will do weekend recaps where the Wings play on Friday and Sunday, or play a back-to-back Friday, Saturday, or something like that. And then we're recapping two games, but those are isolated events still, right? Monday night, you saw two hockey games happen at the exact same time, and it's kind of weird. I know I talked about it a little bit on yesterday's show too. Like this is so common in baseball's preseason, right? In spring training, this happens all the time. They do split squad games daily, almost in the early spring training, at least, especially. And so it's just weird having it happen in hockey. And the downside of it occurring is that there are not enough ways to watch it, right? So you have both of them were streamed via DetroitRedWings.com, just the team's website. They were just streamed on there. I know I had a commenter yesterday talk about, if we could say where the games were televised. As far as I know, for the foreseeable future, most of the preseason games are on there, unless it's nationally televised, something or other, which there's not too many of, obviously, in the preseason. But you had to have two different ways to stream it if you wanted to watch both games at the same time. So that's the boat that we all found ourselves in. There wasn't a score bug for most of the game in the Buffalo one. It is peak preseason puck. All right. And it's kind of tough to, and I know we talk about this a lot too, but it's kind of tough to really judge the NHL roster in this early in the preseason, right? So they kind of split these two games up to have the AHL team and the NHL team. It wasn't that black and white. We'll talk about one very notable omission from the AHL team as he played with the NHL guys. But for the most part, that's kind of the vibe we were getting. And the NHL team got their teeth kicked in and lost 5-1. And the AHL squad went to overtime against Buffalo, which was also a largely AHL team that they had, not entirely, but a large amount. And that was a 4-3 loss in overtime. So they go 0-2 in the span of 5 hours. And I think I want to start with the goaltending in both games. So you saw Talbot and Kosa in the NHL team, which it is kind of, again, this was not, the Wings didn't come out and say, hey, we're going to put all the NHL guys on this team and the AHL on another. It was just, eye test. That was pretty close to what it ended up being. So I think Kosa playing with Talbot was something that's somewhat noteworthy. Neither of them looked very sharp, unfortunately, which kind of sours the Kosa playing with the NHL team vibe that some people were the narrative that some people were trying to push there. Didn't look great. I don't think Talbot looked great either, but what I was starting to say prior, before I got ADHD sidetracked there, was just like, it's tough for me to grade the NHL talent in the preseason because, like, they're very clearly not going maybe even 50%, right? Like, they understand that this is preseason and the best possible thing they can do is not get hurt. That is the most valuable thing that Dylan Larkin, Lucas Raymond, Mo Sider, I mean, really almost all of that roster, right? The most valuable thing they can accomplish in the second preseason game of the year is walk out of there fully healthy. That is the most beneficial thing they can do for the organization on that day. So it's tough to be like, wow, like the defense was not great or the offense looked really sluggish. Well, the offense was putrid in that hockey game, to be honest. I didn't I didn't think it was very good at all. And those were all of the NHL caliber players. So some people were overreacting and kind of freaking out about that. One thing I have to say here before we get any further, if you are coming here and you are looking for somebody who cares about preseason losses, you are in the wrong place. I, from the bottom of my heart, could not care less about preseason losses. Some people really care about, establishing winning early. And I'm not saying like I'm right and you're wrong. I'm just saying I personally do not put any stock into preseason record, preseason wins, preseason losses. I joke around when we beat the Blackhawks because it's funny to me because it's the Blackhawks and we all don't like them. But like I really could not care less. I'm looking at individual performances, lines that mesh well together. We're looking much more on a micro scale here in the preseason, positional battles, roster battles, you name it, right? So that all being said, the offense in the Pittsburgh game, not great, even though it was a lot of NHL players. I don't take too much stock into that. There was a couple players that I think are worth standing out. We talked about the goaltending situation, Talbot and Kosa. In the other game, the goaltending situation, Alex Lyon, and then Campbell, who, I think he's almost forgotten about by this fan base, right? Like this is a guy that is one injury away from being probably the third string goalie. I don't think they're going to throw Kosa into the fire. Like if there's an injury, if there are two goalie injuries in the first 2 months of the season, I think Campbell's the call up. And I think that they signed him very intentionally for that reason to quote unquote protect Kosa from, if goalie gets thin again, like it has for 2 seasons in a row, if goalie injuries happen and it gets thin again, we don't want the only other goalie we have that's not in the NHL to be Kosa because we don't want to rush him for no reason. So seeing him do well in the preseason would give you a little bit of confidence in the goalie depth that the organization has. But on a game-to-game basis, again, that's kind of a personal opinion and personal analysis, I guess. I thought that Lyon and Campbell looked pretty solid, and they faced way more shots than Talbot and Kosa did. Talbot and Kosa let up 2 shots, and both of them barely faced double-digit shots against. Lyon and Campbell, I mean, as a whole, I think both, I guess because of overtime, Campbell ended up playing a lot more than Lyon did. But it was just one of those things where they got the defense in that game was not great. And I think that transitions us then to this team that was really filled with a lot of AHL players or soon to be AHL players. Like I said, defense, not a strength of that game. And does anybody care, right? Like if we have our eyes on the NHL team, we're trying to make the playoffs, etc. I'm not losing sleep over the fact that a roster composed of mostly the Grand Rapids Griffins and even lower, it did not do very well in a preseason game defensively, right? I'm not going to be heartbroken about that. But it is something that is worth noting because the front office continues to preach this system that they're trying to accomplish and how they want it to be organization-wide, right? That means the lower levels. This is something we talk about a lot. In order to fill a system, it's not just, anything can happen in the minors, and then once you make the NHL, you got to fit the system that we want to be. No, if you want to truly implement a system, you do implement it top to bottom. You do have it, you bring in players in the lower levels that fit your systems, that you can, anybody who's rising through all these prospects that are playing through, they get used to what you are trying to accomplish at the NHL level in the A or the O or whatever. So I think it's important to remember that, for a team that is trying to be so defensively minded, again, am I losing sleep over the fact that they gave up 45 shots or whatever it ended up being? No. But in the same breath, I would like to see some improvement from the forwards specifically. And then we'll get into, some individuals, because that's really what most of preseason is all about, especially this early in preseason. We're this early. I mean, the season starts in 2 weeks, week and a half. We're really focusing on individuals and big storylines to take away from there. So we will do more of that right after this. Got to talk to you today about our friends over at FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season big with a return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings. Said it right that time. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, as always, making us your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers that do tune in every day. And we will, of course, be back tomorrow. Another preseason game. Play Pittsburgh yet again. We'll talk about that a little bit at the end of the show. Should I use Brian's name tag just for fun? I don't know. That's probably not great for if this is truly your first time on the show. I'm not Brian. I have far better hair than Brian, and Brian is just far cuter in general. But I do think it would be funny if I was just Brian for the show. We'll put my actual name back up there. That's probably how it's supposed to be done. We're obviously talking about the two preseason losses that the Wings suffered on Monday night, which is still weird to say that they lost 2 games in one night. One of the biggest takeaways and one of the shining stars from the game against Buffalo, which was mostly the AHL squad, was you saw an MBN goal, which is awesome, right? The fact that he's over here is already cool enough. That's something Brian really focused on probably last week, maybe even a couple of weeks ago now, right? Seeing him over here and getting him in camp in his draft year is so cool. But the fact that he is producing, albeit in preseason, is also really cool. That was a beautiful play, beautiful pass as well to set him up there. But yeah, man, they just caught Buffalo a little bit flat-footed on the back line and went at the net and got a perfect pass, got on the stick and put it top shelf there. It was a beauty. And I think seeing him the rest, he's obviously not going to make the team out of camp, but seeing who he plays with is really going to be some of my biggest takeaways from him. Obviously, if he scores a lot, that's going to be really fun, and that'll be a big topic of conversation. But I think on a more micro scale, I'm really interested in the style of players that they surround him with, because there was this conception on draft night that, he's a two-way guy, so he's not great offensively, and they're going to try to put him with other defenders and whatnot. I really like that he scored a goal, because it's a nice reminder that this dude is a scorer and has a really good shot. It's something we covered a lot on this show going into, the draft during draft profile season. So it was really cool just to see him get rewarded with a goal here in the preseason. Lombardi is someone that continues to be very noticeable to me, and I'm not sure if that's a good or a bad thing, to be completely honest with you. I think offensively, I'm really impressed by him, and defensively, I still think there is a ton to be desired. I think there's a lot of improvement that needs to be had on the offensive side of the puck. Now, it's also fair, or on the defensive side of the puck, rather, I think it's also fair to say that when you are especially a forward and you are on a team that is porous defensively, it's hard to stand out and look like a really good defender, right? When the other 4 guys on the ice are not playing defense, if you play really good defense, it's very hard for that to matter, right? And especially when you get to this level, when you get to the NHL level. So I didn't think he looked very sharp defensively, but I don't think anybody in that game looked particularly sharp defensively. So I'm not sure if that was really a team thing where it just snowballed and nobody could really escape it, or if that was him specifically, but I noticed him. I noticed how much I didn't like his defense, I guess is the way I'm going to word it. So that I think is interesting. I think Cross Hannes was quiet. He's a guy that we haven't really talked about so far since the preseason started. And Snively, honestly, continues to be a guy that you can understand why the organization and the coaching staff has been a big fan of him. Elmer Soderblom goal, always fun. The other one of the other goals in this game against Buffalo. It's so weird how little conversation there is surrounding Elmer these days, man. Like, this is a dude that's my Chris Collinsworth. This is a guy. Just watched Monday Night Football, where Chris Collinsworth was not on the broadcast. That was Joe Buck. Anyway, it's really interesting to me how he went from making the team out of camp, right? He was on, and it was because of an injury, but like he was on the opening night roster and then fizzled out. And you knew when they were going to get healthy that he would, get demoted and whatnot. And he kind of struggled as well. But everybody was freaking out about Elmer. And it was, okay, this dude has the intangibles. He's so he does so much that nobody else can do because he's a giant forward, and that's so cool. And he can use the body and all this. Then he got sent down and was wildly unimpressive in Grand Rapids, to the point where that same season, where he literally made the team out of camp, he was getting third and fourth line minutes, and at one point was healthied that season in Grand Rapids. That was some injury stuff, came back. Last season, I think we finally saw a little bit of a resurgence in hype, right? He didn't have a blow you away, oh my goodness, what a fantastic year. But I think that he reminded people that he's still very young, and there still is a lot of, I don't want to say a lot to like necessarily, because there's far from a guarantee that he's going to be a super productive NHL player at this point. But like there is still a lot of those intangibles. I guess I'll just keep recycling the same phrasing there with him. And there's a lot of ways that he can impact a hockey game. And so it was really cool to see him score the way he scored, right? Utilizing the body. You saw good stick work. But the biggest thing was that he didn't get knocked off the puck. And that is something that so much has been talked at length, at nauseum about Soderblom for so long now, right? Was he's so big, but like as a forward, dudes can get under him and not only knock him off the puck, but knock him off his skates, like just completely have him lose balance and make him pretty ineffective just by getting under him. And so, again, not against the best talent in the world. I don't have to keep putting these caveats on the fact that it's the preseason, and it's important to remember that. But seeing him just score the way he did and just bully somebody else straight down the lane, keep the puck the entire time and bury it, I think was really cool to see. So shout out to Elmer. His future is just such a weird question. I've seen some people that are like, he's not going to play in the NHL. And there are some guys that are still like, hey, he could still be a top 6, like, effective guy. I think the truth probably lies somewhere in between. I still think he could be kind of an effective bottom 6, Rasmussen type, but he's still got a lot of work to do. This dude's still not NHL ready. And I think that will continue to be something we keep an eye out for and see if he can improve on those things that I kind of just laid out there. So again, defense as a whole, not great in that game. 41 shots against. Let's talk about the Pittsburgh game a little bit more. Started off the show with a little bit of goalie talk involving the Penguins game. 5-1 loss. I have some takeaways from this game, despite the fact that I don't think that the main guys were very impressive. And I'm not upset about that. Again, we've talked about this before. Brian and I talked about this after the first preseason game. They know when to turn it on and turn it off. They know what preseason is for. That they're not going to, play like this is the postseason in game, whatever it is, 3 or 4 of the preseason. But there was some noticeable things still happening, I think, on the defensive side of the puck, because they didn't allow very many shots. The goaltending was kind of spotty, but as a whole, this was low event hockey in general. And that is the system that Malone is trying to induce, right? He's trying to implement this low low event, we don't have too many shots, but we also don't give up too many shots, and we take advantage of our opportunities. And as long as they don't get a ton of opportunities, we should come out on top more times than not. And that was kind of the epitome of this game. The Penguins took advantage of almost all of their high danger opportunities, and the Wings did not take advantage of very many of theirs. The only goal was scored by Lucas Raymond. I do have some individuals that I want to point out here in this hockey game, though. A lot on the roster side of things as well, just who was playing with that team, but some performance-based stuff as well. So we will do that right after this. Got to talk to y'all today about our friends over at Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats that you need, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. They have so many great features on Game Time, all-in pricing, so you can toggle this feature and then see your entire total up front. There's no surprise fees at checkout or anything like that. You can get a view of your seat before you buy the ticket. And of course, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Third and final segment, Locked On Red Wings. Almost said Tigers there. That was a close call. Locked On Red Wings. Appreciate you all for tuning in, despite Brian's absence here. So going over I almost said Pirates. Wow. Really in baseball mode. We got playoffs. We got playoff ball in, and I just recorded Locked On Tigers. So I apologize for the consistent fumbling of words here, but in this Penguins game, I've already reiterated a lot, kind of the effort level by some of these guys, but the blue line also was still, we'll say, shoddy at best. I was still not super impressed with just kind of the back line as a whole. And again, they didn't allow very many shots, but I think that there was still a lot of room to be desired with some of the pairs that were utilized in that game. And then ultimately, when you have that on top of not very good goalie play, you're going to get a 5-1 kick to the gut there. Raymond, we already talked about his goal. I think the biggest takeaway I had from both games combined, just from the calendar day of Red Wings hockey on Monday, was that Nate Danielson was playing with the big boys. I think that's such a huge takeaway, right? If Brian was here and we were doing, difference makers and whatnot, I'm not sure he would end up being a difference maker and was like, incredible and looks like he was the best player on the ice. But there was a lot of effort on there, surrounded by a lot of guys that weren't showing a lot of effort. And he was playing with mostly NHL players. And I'm sure that will be read into a lot by the fan base. I'm sure that will be talked about a lot by the fan base. But I do think that means something. Do I think that means he's going to make the team out of camp? No, I still don't think he's going to. But I do think it means they're trying to see where he could potentially fit on the roster. Does he need to play up the middle? Can they play him on the wings like we talked about yesterday? I think there's a lot still that we need to learn about Danielson and his fit in this current iteration of the Detroit Red Wings before we jump to any conclusions. And I think that's what they're trying to find out. So I really appreciated the fact, honestly, that he was playing with some of the big dogs there. Another player that I think is worth bringing up in this game was Carter Mazur. Man, did a lot in not very much time on the ice, only played in 14 minutes, had multiple block shots, multiple hits, multiple shots on net, and a penalty against. He was everywhere, had some PIMs, had some blocks, had some hits. Like he was really doing the most and was not afraid to get in front of the net, which we've talked about a lot. That is why people are so excited for Carter Mazur, is a performance like that, right? Now, again, he was a minus on the night and found himself in the penalty box. I'm not saying he was some miraculous, inspiring performance, but the fact that he can impact the game in so many different ways while playing fewer than 15 minutes is exactly why a lot of people think there's a legitimate chance he can make the team out of camp. So he's somebody that we're going to continue to highlight on this show. I know Brian really likes as well, and we will continue to talk about and keep a very close eye on in the preseason. I still am continuing the rest of the preseason under the belief that if there's any of the young prospects that have a legitimate chance of making the NHL roster out of camp, that it is Carter Mazur. And I think that is the reason why. Another thing I noticed, and again, take it with a grain of salt. We're going to keep reiterating that. I think that any line that Tarasenko was on was really brutal defensively. It was a sight to behold, and not in a good way. Anytime Vlad was on the ice, it just seemed like there was a huge defensive breakdown. Not even him all the time necessarily. Just really seemed like that is going to be something that I'm sure a lot of people are going to talk about this season. That's something that when we brought Tarasenko in, it was okay, like that's great. You got more goal scoring. We're all really excited. You can put him with Patrick Kane and hopefully get a lot of offense. That'd be really cool. Same breath. Are they going to be on the same line really? Because that's going to be a rough defensive unit. And that's something we've obviously talked about a lot, and I'll continue to talk about, I'm sure. But it was noticeable. It was pretty darn noticeable. And it wasn't even with Kane all the time, right? It wasn't even exclusively when Kane, it was anybody that was sharing the ice with Vlad at any point. It was not a fantastic defensive effort by that unit. So that's going to be something we continue to kind of focus in on, I'm sure. Wings play the Penguins again on Tuesday evening. So we'll see what personnel group plays against them. I'm wondering if it's just going to be a regurgitation of the same group, or because of travel and the fact that they're literally in different places, if there's going to be more of an intertwining of squads here now that we're all back to, one unit and one big happy family. So that'll be kind of interesting. But those are kind of my biggest takeaways. I mean, I have some more players written down here. The Buffalo blue line, I shouldn't say that. The Wings blue line in the Buffalo game, I thought was really not great performance-wise. And you don't have very many big names there. I guess you have Wallinder, but it's like Lodgeson. Scored a goal, by the way. Shout out. But like Rafferty and Tuomisto getting a lot of ice time. Tuomisto's had an interesting preseason so far. I think there's been some shifts that have looked really good, and there's some where he's kind of just been honestly lost out there. So that's been pretty hit or miss. But that's I don't know. I'm not taking a ton away from either of these games defensively, considering it was split squad preseason. But for whatever it is worth, I think that there's still a lot to be desired on the blue line for both of these units and both of these groups on Monday's game. And again, I think the forwards actually played a little bit better defensively than maybe I'm giving them credit for. They didn't allow very many shots against Pittsburgh. Whereas, against Buffalo, they allowed 1 million shots. So there is a clear difference there. It's just, I really do think it's hard to grade given the effort of some of the high-end players, which again, the most valuable thing they can do, we'll end the show how we started. The most valuable thing that those top end, elite players that you just paid a ton of money to can do in a preseason game is walk out of there fully healthy. So that's what they did. We'll take it. They've been healthy so far. Knock on wood, that stays the same. That's all I got. Thanks for being Locked On Red Wings, your first listen every single day. Shouts to every dayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back tomorrow, recapping another preseason game. I think we'll be back tomorrow. Got to figure out how my day is going to unfold with the Detroit Tigers playing in the postseason. It's earlier in the day, obviously, but I'm going to be running around like a crazy person. There's going to be a lot of work that I have to do in that game for just a lot of things. So we'll see how the day kind of plays out. If we're not back tomorrow, then we'll be back the next day, and then Brian will be back here shortly here in the middle or maybe even end of the week. I'm not really sure exactly. He just kind of was like, hey, figure it out, man. Not actually, but love you, Brian. Hope you're having a great honeymoon. Love you all for tuning in. We will be back tomorrow. I had some people get mad at me for not ending the show with a wee ball. That's on me. So wee ball, same time, same place. I remembered it this time. Your team every day.